You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast, exposing the struggles and celebrating the successes in the life of coaches who are action takers and creating authentic impact in today's world. Whether you're just starting out, expanding your reach, or exploding your impact, you're in the right place right now. Stay tuned and be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Now, here are your hosts of the Coach's Journey podcast.
And every time I talk to coaches, it's the same hesitation. Like, oh, well, then maybe you should do it 1 hour. Maybe you should do 45 minutes. Maybe you should. And I tell them, like, I've tried it all. I've tried 60 minutes. I've tried 90 minutes. I've tried 2 hours. I think it comes down to we feel like we're going to give away something that will not get them to sign up. But the effect is actually the opposite.
Yeah. The thing is this, right? When there's resistance to doing that, usually it's because we're thinking transactionally, right? So like I'll share like some distinctions that really help me like grow my business. And one of them is the difference between transaction and relationship, right? And so most of us, like when we do business, we're very transactional. It's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna spend an hour and this is what I'm getting in return, right? And so, and by the way, like when I first learned the Prosperous Coach way, I was actually like just seeing it as another strategy to get clients. So in a way, it was still a little bit transactional, right? Because what starts happening, like even if you do it that way, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and you get frustrated, right? It's only later, I joined Steve Chandler's. So Steve is one of the authors, right, of the book. I joined this coaching school, and that's when it really starts shifting for me, is that serving people is not just a way to, build a business and get clients. It's a way of like, yes, sometimes we start like that, like it's like doing, but that's more like surface level, right? It's more really powerful when we become that, right? And it becomes a way of just being, right? And just to give you an example, and this is the paradox, right, in business, is that, we all want clients, we all want money, and you should like desire that because you're in business to make money, to make a profit, right? So you can, most of us do that so we can provide for our families, right? But we have different reasons, but otherwise we can just run a charity. But here's the thing, like that desire for money, we need to put it aside, because if we constantly thinking about wanting money, wanting clients, actually you're going to struggle more. So the paradox is that actually if you focus on serving people really powerfully and you just focus on the process, and to be honest, that's also the thing that's in your control, right? So if you do a great job coaching people, right, it's very likely that at the end of that call, the person will ask you, like, how can I hire you? How can I work with you? And sometimes if they don't ask, you can ask them like, hey, was this useful for you? And they will say, yeah. They will share like what's happened. And then you can ask them like, would you like to know how we can work together, right? So what happens here? So we want to focus on service and like almost like detach from the outcome, right? And the better we get at this part, the more people actually end up working with us. So we make more money, we get more clients by actually shifting our focus towards service, right? But again, it has to be professional service, right? Like if you just keep giving like everyone 2 hours of your time and you don't know how to enroll people, and you don't make proposals, like you don't tell them, you don't ask them that question, like, would you like to work with me? You're going to be a broke coach that's in service. That's also like, that's again, like really good, important to understand, right? It's because I don't know who, I think there's a guy called Adam Grant. He wrote a few good books, and in one of his research, he shows that he found out in his research that the 10% most successful people are givers, right? So most of us, we think like, oh, I need to be a giver, right? But also the bottom 10% of people are givers.
Are also givers.
Yeah. And so I've met people that say, you know what, I love the Prosperous Coach, and they're like struggling, they're broke, like they don't make money. And sometimes they're really good coaches. I've had clients, right? We have this one client, she still works with us. 8 years in, she was like struggling as a coach, and she's really good. She's done a bunch of certifications, really good, but struggling financially. And it's because she didn't get that professional part right. Meaning that, you can't just go around and giving to people without actually receiving, right? The receiving part is part of the professional coach, right? Otherwise, you're not like, it's the same with a dentist, right? It's not something new. The thing is, we often separate it and think that this is like a whole new thing, but it's the same with a dentist. It's the same with a physiotherapist, right? Doctor, they're all the same. They will just like, they will treat you and then they will bill you. They will just tell you like how much it is.
Yeah, they do. And this was really challenging for me when I was starting out. Like there's a lot in there in terms of our thinking process, because a lot of things come in. There's our money issues will come in there. Our lack of ability to make proposals will come in there. Our lack of skill sets in sales will come in there. But for me to even, for example, when I was struggling with this, for me to, in the beginning, I was in the bottom 10%. Like I really wanted to serve people, but I was just doing that. I wasn't really making clear proposals. I didn't know how to sell. I didn't know any of that stuff, but I wasn't even motivated to learn that stuff because in my mind, at some level, that was a negative thing. I just care, but I had to work this stuff out, partly because I went through a lot of coaching, but partly I had to really make sense of it in my own being, like, how does this align with my values? So I found all sorts of weird ways to make sense of it. So you know what I would do? I would get, when I would make proposals, I wasn't making proposals to people. I was making proposals to God, to be honest. It sounds odd, but I'm like, that's a gift from God for me to serve in the world. To me, that worked out very well. And to this day, like that has stayed with me, is that's just a gift God gives me for doing what matters to me, what had the potential that He's given me to serve. But I had to work out. Now, I'm not saying everybody should think like that, because people will have different ways of looking at this, but I had to find my own ways of doing it. But as soon as I was able to kind of deal with the mental hurdle and the psychological hurdle, then I was more motivated to learn more about sales, about proposals, and all the other things that you need to understand to be able to even sell coaching. So in your view, how can people deal? Because that money part is a big problem for a lot of coaches, because coaches generally are service oriented. Yeah. They are impact driven, but then, and I always say that if you take out the money component from coaches, I think they'd be the best salespeople. As soon as you bring in money into it, they screw up.
Yeah, no, I think like it is. And I struggled with that as well. I think what helped me and what's helped a lot of like the coaches I've worked with is seeing that, okay, service, like there's different levels of service, right? So you can serve someone for an hour or 2 hours. And I learned this really from Steve Chandler, so credit goes to him, is that like the biggest level of service is a paid relationship, or the highest level of service. And that's it. Like just writing that down and looking at that again and again, connect to that. The highest level of service and impact happens within a paid relationship, right? So like, here's the thing, like if you think about it, you can have one coaching conversation. And by the way, like in general, we have a fun rule, you know, in our coaching school, is when we say you're not allowed to make a proposal in the first session, right? So it's like, I always compare it to dating. It's like, don't ask the girl like to come home with you at the first date, or don't ask her to get married, right? She'll freak out. And the thing is, in general, we want to treat it like that. Even if you know, like you want to spend the rest of your life with this person, right? You're already in love. I love this show. It's called How I Met Your Mother, right?
I do too.
You know, I think that's, what's the main guy's name? Yeah, Ted, yeah. Sometimes I confuse it with Ross from Friends, but
similar shows.
Similar, yeah. But Ted does that mistake, right? Like first date, he's like, I love you. And then, you know, he messes it up, right? It's similar with coaching. I think it's like, you might know like, hey, this could be a great client. I can help this person. And the client might even feel like that. And they might even express that, but we still want to slow things down, right? So ideally, again, this is not like a rule. Sometimes it works, but in general, 2 or 3 sessions, that's the best thing. That's the best thing you can do.
So help me clarify that. So if I were to go towards like the sales process, so I do. I mean, I didn't even go into your sales process, but that's what ended up happening anyway for me. But I think one of the things that became for me is that I kind of released expectation, because most of the sales like coaches, and I did have a sales coach and other trainers that taught me, like they came from a very sales mentality that you need to close on the call. And I never felt aligned with that. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, because I've had so many calls where I didn't close there, but then they ended up signing up a week later. I just made sure I followed up with them and everything. And every time I would bring that up, they're like, no. Well, what if you did do that? You would have more sales. Like maybe. I don't know how to prove or disprove that. But then when I started kind of doing this the way, so for example, in most cases, even if I get a referral, I'll meet the person for a few minutes, for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and I just get to know them a little bit. And then I would do a 2-hour session now. And sometimes I don't even end the proposal there. And I tell them, like, let's talk about it in another 20, 30-minute call. So it ends up being 2-3 calls by the time the sales moves forward. And I want them to feel like they're making a decision long-term rather than kind of short-term jumping into it, which works very well for retention. Because if they are not fully invested and they just made a rash decision, more than likely they're going to ask for their money back as well. And
exactly, yeah. It creates like, buyer's remorse, right?
Yeah.
And so here's the thing, like it's important for us coaches to understand like a bit of like the psychology behind that, right? That when we slow down, it creates more safety. For us, sometimes it doesn't feel like a big commitment, right? Like, oh, someone's spending 5,000 on 3 months of coaching or 6 months. But the way you have to look at it is just like they're committing, not just money, to committing time, they're committing to be with you, right? So, and so what happens usually, naturally, as we talk about money, right, there's fear coming up, right? There's insecurity coming up. So one of the things this does, by spending more time, we just naturally create more safety. Also, like, and here's the thing, like, I got like great examples of this where I've met coaches that had like a full calendar, right? Met this one coach, she was doing well in terms like meeting people, booking them in and making proposals, but she was struggling. Like people were saying, I loved the coaching session, but they were saying no. And we just made this one change. Like I asked her, like, how many conversations do you have with someone before you make a proposal? And she said, well, I always sell on the first call. And I only gave her this one little challenge. I said, okay, from now on, spend 2 to 3 sessions with people. And she made that one change. And I even invited her to go back to like 4 or 5 people. In the last few weeks before our conversation, she made like 4 or 5 proposals. I told her, go back to those people, invite them again, right? And she signed up a bunch of people like straight away. And the thing is this, right? Like, we talk about this, like this theory around like it being a relationship business, right? People feel that when you slow down, people feel that. And also like when you have 2 coaching sessions or 3 coaching sessions, there's things happening in between the sessions. This is the power of coaching is not just within the coaching container, like within the coaching.
Much of it is outside, actually, in their own realization.
Exactly. Because if you coach someone, for example, on, how they see their world, they can experience their world in a different way in that week. Or, if you coach them on their relationship, they're going to notice differences in their relationship. Like often when I coach people on their business, between the first, second, and third session, they're signing up clients. I had one guy sign up a 40K client before he even paid me. And it's happened a lot of times that something happens. And the thing is, we don't want to be focused on like pushing results, but it's being focused on creating impact, right? And I learned this like a long time ago at a workshop. It's like the higher you charge, the more you charge, the more impact you need to create upfront, like before you make the proposal. And that was really interesting because it's at that time where I had a full practice and I was like upping my prices, right? And I thought, okay, I'm getting a bit more resistance. So I thought, okay, how do I create more impact? Right. And here's the thing, the idea behind this is like, because some people might hear this and they're like, oh, this is a great strategy. I'm going to do 2 coaching sessions, 3 coaching sessions. And here's the thing, like, it didn't work exactly like, it didn't work perfectly at the beginning for me. And the reason is because in every session, like my mindset, like I was focused on enrolling this client, right? And here's what happens when you're focusing on enrolling someone, you're showing up differently. So I was trying to impress the client. I was trying to, like, I was pleasing them, right? I was trying to win them over. All those things, right, that are kind of creepy, right? And I was in between, I was coaching them a little bit, but I was just really thinking about like, how do I get them to say yes? How do I get them to enroll? Maybe like, oh, let me share like this story about this client, which wasn't relevant, but I need to show this person I'm like really good at what I do. And what happens when you do that is you're doing very little coaching and you're doing a lot of talking. One of the things I do, like when I teach people about this, is like we have a whiteboard and we put on in the middle, right? When you're trying to, we put a line in the middle. So imagine there's a line in the middle, and on one side it says trying to enroll people. And this is what you do when you try to enroll. And everyone can do this exercise for themselves. What I was doing, I was like trying to impress them, trying to win them over. I was pleasing them. I wasn't challenging them, right? So I was holding back. I was trying to doing all these things just to win someone over. And then on the other side, the change really happened. And this is really, by the way, like the core philosophy of the prosperous coach. A lot of times people miss that. Richard Ledwin says in the book that if you would record me, you wouldn't see a difference between me working with a paying client and me being in an enrollment conversation. And that's where the magic happens. And there's a great book by Patrick Lencioni, it's called Getting Naked, where he does exactly the same with corporate companies. So this really applies to corporate. I've helped clients close really big deals, and they say like, oh, what should I do? Like I have a conversation with the CEO, and I say, just go coach them as if they've paid you already. So you want to make a proposal for 65,000, act as if they've paid you already. And that's how one of our clients got a 65,000 pound deal, by just acting as if he's paid already. So the difference here is when I start doing that, everything shifted. And all that stuff that I was doing went out of the window. And I was like, you know what? It felt so good because I didn't need to be so conscious of, am I saying the right thing? Are they liking me? I just went on and thought, you know what? If I'm coaching, let's say if I'm coaching Amanda, I'm just going to act like Amanda's paid me 10,000 already, right? What am I doing here? Like, how can I make this session really impactful, right? What homework can I give her that would be really useful for her? And, and then when there's a situation, look, if someone has paid you already, you don't need to impress them anymore. If someone has paid you, you don't need to please them. And again, this is sometimes help. We all do this a little bit, but this is as we evolve as coaches, we want to serve our clients. So it's we don't need to hold back thinking oh, if I say this, they're not going to sign up. So there's a lot of little things that change. So on this other side,
wait, before you go forward, because there's a lot in there, and there's a very powerful point there. And this was a huge realization for me, and actually I got it from Richard Ledwin. We're basically marketing his book, to be honest. This whole episode is about the prosperous coach, which I've done a lot. That's one of the whenever I talk to new coaches, have you gotten the book? No, that's the first thing you need to do. And we do that because he has served in that book, because he changed my perspective. And I think one of the reasons why I signed up also with the Siawash was because he was talking the same language, because I had been following that for a while. So, and this is the part that's what you're saying is so powerful, but in practice is actually very hard to do. It's very simple, but in practice it's actually very, very hard to do when you're not aware of it. Because what ends up happening, it comes down to awareness. Because when we're sitting there with a client, we might even not be thinking consciously that we're enrolling the client, but we might have gotten there with that energy, and we're not aware of it in that moment. And this is why I always encourage my clients, the coaches that I work with, you need to listen to your calls over and over. Listen to your tonality. Listen to are you actually challenging them? Are you actually asking them deeper questions? Are you just giving them advice and telling them what to do? Are you going deeper? Are you really interested in their life? Or are you just finding some tools to give them so they can sign up with you? That creates a very, very different energy. And then one of the phrases that has stuck with me from Richard Ledwin in the book, he simply said, if you really want to be really good as a coach, if you want to serve people, because my thinking was, okay, I need to figure out the business stuff because I don't know how to do this stuff. But he said, no, just coach, coach, and coach. You need to be in coaching calls constantly. And a lot of coaches have this misconception, is that they've just gone through a certification, they're just going to jump in and start charging $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and it'll be just fine. But there's a lot that happens in coaching sessions that you need to review and give yourself feedback. And on top of that, you need to have feedback from other people that are in the coaching world, because a lot of times we get stuck in our own bad habits. This is one of the reasons in our community, one of the things we do is we work through the business and marketing side of things, but our focus is you need to get feedback on your coaching process from other coaches and from your clients. If you're not getting feedback, you don't know what's actually happening. You don't even know if you're serving them. You might have just gotten lucky with one or two clients.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you can do all of the things I said. And again, this is about being honest, right? A lot of coaches, when you ask them, how good are you? They're like, yeah, I'm an 8 out of 10. And I used to think I'm at 8. I think probably in my first 6 months, I was 4 out of 10. Yeah. It was more motivational stuff than coaching, right? But that's the thing, all of this stuff.
You need to get your life in order. If you don't do that by next session, that's
exactly. So the thing is this, right? All of the stuff we talked about previously, focusing on relationships, spending 2-3 sessions, all of that works. But at the core of it, you have to be good at what you do. So that's why I love what you're doing with the Coaching Mastery community, right? Because you can do this to a certain extent by yourself, by just, slowing down and asking, like, after every question. I've been asking that for 6.5 years, right? What went well? What can I do better? What did I learn from this coaching session? But when you have a coach, when you have, someone else that can give you feedback, it's a lot more powerful because we don't see our own blind spots, right? So that's really important, because, when people say, like, well, I've read the book, I've tried all this stuff, it doesn't work for me, it's because most likely, like, the coaching is not impactful, right?
Yeah.
The coaching is not impactful. And, so that's probably, like, like, here's the funny thing, right? Sometimes, like, it's a bit annoying, like, but, Steve Chandler, his school was about acquiring clients, like creating clients, right? But one of the things he would keep coming back to is, like, how good you are as a coach, right? And there's a book that I don't think a lot of coaches read. It's not your, like, typical personal development book. There's 2 books that I think every coach needs to read that's really serious about making this, like, a profession. And both of them are by Cal Newport. One of them is called Deep Work, and one of them is called So Good They Can't Ignore You. And here's the thing, I have that book, like, I have a library in the sitting room, and I have that book facing forward, meaning that I can just see the title. And here's the thing, you could go and just, for people that listen to this, the books are both of them, like, it takes you hours, like, on Audible, I think each book is like 6 to 8 hours. But here's the thing, you could go and just watch a book summary and get the big ideas from this. I do recommend you to read these, but here's the idea behind the core philosophy of both books, right? That you have to create time to go really deeper on and become a master of your craft.
You're listening to the Coach's Journey podcast.